2004, Dallas, Texas. A charity dinner, a teacher who almost stayed home, and a man who had been doing this for years. He was charming, attentive. He remembered everything she said. She had forgotten what that felt like. 8 months later, he got down on one knee. The ring caught the light. She said yes before he finished the question. She had never touched that account in 14 years. She told herself 60 days was not very long. She trusted him. April 2004, 120 guests. The flowers were perfect. The music was playing. He never came. She had not planned on going to the charity dinner that evening, had almost stayed home the way she almost always did on Friday nights, grading papers at the kitchen table while her daughter watched television in the next room. But a colleague had asked her as a favor. Someone needed to fill a seat at the last minute, and Sarah Mitchell had said yes the way she said yes to most things that were asked of her, because it was easier than explaining why not. She was 36 years old, a high school English teacher in Dallas, Texas, the kind of woman who remembered every student's name and forgot to eat lunch and kept 14 years of savings in an account she had never once touched, because touching it felt like admitting she might need it. The divorce had been 3 years ago, quiet and expensive in the way divorces always are, and she had come out of it with her daughter, her apartment, and the particular steadiness that comes from having survived something you were not sure you would. She arrived at the charity dinner in the dress she wore to school events, ordered water, and was standing near the back of the room looking at her phone when she heard the door open and the particular shift in noise that a room makes when someone interesting has walked into it. He arrived in a dark suit that fit the way expensive suits fit, unhurried, nodding at people who greeted him as though he had expected to be recognized, and she noticed him the way you notice something that does not quite match the rest of the frame. His name was James Caldwell, and he found his way to her side of the room within 20 minutes, which she would later understand was not coincidence, and introduced himself with the kind of attention that made her feel like she was the most interesting person he had encountered in a long time. He asked her what she did, and she told him, and he said that was important work in the way that people say things they actually mean, rather than things they think you want to hear, and she noted the difference because she had spent 3 years learning to notice it. He told her he was in real estate development, had projects across 3 states, was in Dallas for a deal that was taking longer than expected, and spoke about his work with the casual comfort of someone who does not need to impress anyone with it. They talked for 2 hours at that dinner, and he asked for her number at the end of the evening, and she gave it to him, which was not something she did, had not done it in 3 years, and drove home feeling something she had almost forgotten the shape of. He called the next morning, which she had not expected, and suggested dinner the following week at a restaurant she had heard of but never been to, the kind of place where the menu has no prices on the version they hand to the guest. He picked her up in a car she did not know the name of but understood was expensive, and the dinner was the kind of evening that feels constructed from the outside but feels entirely real from the inside. And she came home at midnight and sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Over the following weeks, he showed her his life with the openness of someone who has nothing to hide. The house in Preston Hollow that he said he had bought 4 years ago, the cars in the garage, the office downtown where assistants moved around a glass conference room with the efficiency of people who are paid well to do so. She met his business partners at a dinner he hosted, men who spoke about James with the familiarity of long association, who mentioned deals and timelines and returns in the shorthand of people who share a professional language, and she sat at the table and felt the particular warmth of being included in a life that was larger than her own. Her daughter met him at month 4, which Sarah had delayed because she understood what it meant to introduce someone to a child, and he was exactly right with her. Not trying too hard, not performing interest, just present in the way that children recognize as genuine and adults forget to notice. By month 6, she had stopped asking herself the questions she had started the relationship asking herself, had let the accumulation of consistent evenings and returned calls and small remembered details build into something that felt like the most solid thing in her life since before the divorce. He proposed on a Thursday evening in November, at the restaurant where they had their first dinner, with a ring that caught the light in the way that rings do when they are meant to be seen, and she looked at it and looked at him and said yes, before he had finished the question. The wedding was planned for the following April. 120 guests, a venue in uptown Dallas that required a deposit she had paid herself, because James had said his accounts were temporarily consolidated during a deal closing, and he would reimburse her the following week, which he did, exactly on time. 2 months before the wedding, he came to her apartment on a Sunday evening with documents spread across her kitchen table and explained that a development opportunity had appeared that required a capital partner within 72 hours, the kind of deal that comes once and does not wait, and that his own liquidity was tied up in the current project's final phase. He needed $300,000, he said, for 60 days, at which point the deal would close and she would receive her capital back, plus a return that he wrote on a piece of paper and slid across the table. And he looked at her with the expression of a man who is asking something difficult because he has no other option and no one else to ask. She sat with the piece of paper for a long time and asked the questions that a careful person asks. She had always been careful, 14 years of careful, and he answered each one with the patience of someone who expected them and had prepared for them. And the answers were consistent and detailed and made sense. She withdrew $300,000 from the account she had never once touched in 14 years, transferred it to the account number he had written on a document that had the name of his company printed at the top, and drove home telling herself that 60 days was not very long and that she knew him, and that knowing someone was the same as having reason to trust them. The morning of the wedding, she was at the venue by 8, her daughter beside her, the dress on, the flowers arranged, the caterers moving through the space with the efficiency of people who have done this many times and understand that the timeline is not flexible. By 11 o'clock, with the ceremony scheduled for noon, his phone was going to voicemail and she was telling herself there was an explanation, and her maid of honor was telling her the same thing, and the guests were seated, and the room was full, and the flowers were perfect, and the music was playing. By 12:30, she was still in the dress, and the officiant had stepped outside, and her daughter was holding her hand, and she called the bank, and the account she had transferred the money to had been closed the previous morning. The police were called that afternoon, and the FBI became involved within 48 hours when the investigation revealed that James Caldwell was not his real name, that the house in Preston Hollow had been a furnished rental paid week by week, that the car was leased under a false identity, and that the business address downtown was a shared office space rented by the month. His real name was Marcus Allen, and he had done versions of this in Ohio in 2001, in Georgia in 2002, and in Nevada in 2003. 3 women, 3 stolen futures, a total of $480,000 across 4 years before Sarah's $300,000 was added to that number. He was located in Phoenix, Arizona, 6 weeks after the wedding that did not happen, sitting at a restaurant dinner table across from a woman who had just agreed to have a second date. And the agents who arrested him said he looked up when they approached with the particular expression of someone who has known this moment was coming and is almost relieved it has finally arrived. He was convicted in federal court in 2006 on charges of wire fraud, identity fraud, and interstate financial crimes across 4 states, and was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. Asset recovery proceedings returned $180,000 to Sarah, and the ring, which she had kept in a drawer, was assessed by a jeweler who told her it was cubic zirconia worth approximately $400. She stood at that altar in an orange dress, not white, because she had decided that this time everything was going to be different. Did you notice she was wearing orange? If you did, tell us in the comments, did you like that choice or not? Subscribe to Dark Chapters US, because there are many more chapters left to uncover, and none of them are easy to read.